Hello, it's me again. So today's video, I thought it would be kind of fun and also helpful to discuss the idea of like how to help yourself identify what character trope might be holding you hostage. If you don't know my backstory and if this video is being like randomly suggested to you by an algorithm, I am someone who was groomed and brainwashed by a predator from 13 to 16 very early on in my life. And after being groomed and brainwashed by a predator and ultimately sexually assaulted by him, I thought that after I got physically away from him and out of the relationship that I was safe. But what I didn't realize and what I've come to understand now is that through the grooming and the brainwashing that I went through, there were a lot of ideas that I was indoctrinated into about love, about sex, but ultimately and most importantly about myself that caused me to go through the world with a certain belief system that held me hostage within certain character tropes that I believed about myself, and also handicapped me in those relationships. I had a weakened identity and sense of self. I had allowed and continued to allow people to break down my sense of self. And this started ultimately, obviously, from my childhood. But one of the things that I like exploring on my YouTube channel is the idea of examining the stories around us that we're listening to, examining the stories that we tell ourselves. You know, there is a way to become empowered within yourself when you really start to realize that you can change those stories, you can change those belief systems. And that is one of the most powerful things that you can do in your journey of recovery if you are someone coming out of emotionally abusive relationships where perhaps there was a theme of allowing them to tell you who you were and you also telling yourself in agreement with what they were telling you or what you believed, you know, you furthering that belief and that narrative that you also were the thing that they were telling you that you were. There's lots of different tropes that you can be presented with within these relationships. Sometimes it is the broken one, you know, you're told that you are broken down, that you are severely flawed. Another thing you might have been told or story that you might have been told or taught subconsciously through the actions of people around you throughout your childhood or serious relationships in your life is maybe that your sole purpose is to be the helper or the hero and you do not matter, or you will not have relationships unless you serve these roles. Maybe you were told and handicapped by a sort of belief system that existed around you that maybe you only are accepted as long as you don't have emotional needs. There's a lot of different stories that we can be told, or a lot of different stories we can pick up on and come to believe ourselves that leave us very vulnerable. But how you are flawed, the areas where they might have convinced you that you are seriously damaged as a person, that's different for all of us. And so that's one reason I wanted to kind of go into this today, to kind of help you realize and explore your areas of vulnerability. That's another thing that I'm very passionate about on my YouTube channel, is helping you understand the areas where you are vulnerable. I think if you go out into the world and you ask someone, do you think you're a vulnerable person? Women might be more willing to acknowledge this than men, but if you really hone in on that and ask people, what areas do you think you're vulnerable in? A lot of people are not even aware of the emotional vulnerabilities that they have. What I kind of see it as visually is almost like a piece of armor that you're wearing, and your vulnerabilities are the holes in that armor. And if you're not aware of them, it's much easier for things to get in. Or using the analogy of the house, which I use quite a bit on my channel, you know, if you have a house and you knew that there was a part of your house that was more vulnerable, a window, you know, that didn't secure properly, maybe the lock on your front door hasn't been working and closing like well lately, you would get that stuff fixed. And it is interesting how we almost sometimes are more protective of the physical objects that we own, like our house, like our car. But when it comes to us and our mind, learning how to protect our mind, because if you can get the mind, if someone can get your mind, get a hold of your mind, The body follows. I've always said this. If you can get the mind, the body follows. So people are trying to get bodies. People are trying to get your life, you know, and I don't want people to walk around paranoid and scared. I'm trying to talk about the most extreme examples, because if you can really learn these skills, you don't have to walk around paranoid. You don't have to walk around afraid. That's what's so great about this. Yes, any new skill that you learn requires more effort and intentionality up front to remember to do these things, to get into the habit of these things becoming second nature to you. But for me nowadays, after all the work that I've done with a lot of the things that I talk about on my channel and the realizations that I've had, you know, now that I have more and better tools in my toolbox, I don't have to walk around as afraid. I walk around much more confident because I know my areas of vulnerability, and I have worked very hard on developing tools to protect those specific areas of vulnerability for myself. The main thing that I want to impress upon you to understand is that if you've really looked in the face of your fantasy weaknesses and your fantasy fears, because so many fears are based in fantasy, not reality. If you've really stared in the face of all that stuff and you know those things as well as you can, and someone else tries to come along and tell you what those things are, as well as tell you who you are, you've looked at all aspects of yourself deeper than most people normally have. And that's a strength. And it's going to be 10 times harder for them to try to tell you anything about your own fantasies, fears, weaknesses, etc., because you'll know those things. You'll be educated in those things. So they're not going to be the one educating you. This video today is actually going to be sort of a preview of the activity book that I'm working on. I wanted to kind of show you guys a sample of the different activities that I'm coming up with to help people sort of explore themselves and understand either the ways that they've been brainwashed into ideas that aren't good for them, really explore the way that they think about other people, think about intimacy, think about vulnerability. I'm really coming up with quite a few like activity ideas, and I'm like super excited about it. This started out as a book, but the more that I think about the different activities and the ways that, you know, you can almost have helping you have a conversation with yourself, and I think it's so much safer too. You know, when I want to process the stuff that I'm sort of figuring out about myself, sometimes there's not always a safe person to have that conversation with, or sometimes you just don't want to have that conversation with someone because it's very personal and private. And I do feel like this activity workbook is going to be a great way to have that conversation with yourself and help yourself like ask better questions. So the video today is just one example of the activities that I'm kind of coming up with for this book, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So today we're going to be talking about how you can personally kind of identify the tropes and the ideas that might be holding you hostage and leaving you more vulnerable. The areas within yourself where you think that you might be worthless, where you think that you're damaged and broken, where you really consider certain aspects of yourself either completely invaluable, or there is a belief that if you did not have a certain quality, you're overvaluing certain qualities, because if you did not have those qualities, no one would love you. We're not meant for everyone, and that's okay. I'm not meant for everyone. My channel's not meant for everyone. But in order to be a good friend, the requirements are not that I have every quality under the sun or that I'm a perfect person. And that's true for relationships as well. The quality is that you care enough to be trying to grow, that you have the ability to apologize, that you're trying to understand these things. So I hope you can see how those are very different ideas. And so looking even at this aspect of things where there's the belief that if I don't have this quality, no one will love me. If people have that contingency that I will not be friends with you unless you have, you know, the ability to always be strong, or you have to have the ability to always be funny, or within romantic relationships specifically, the porn star trope, which I'm going to make a video on, the porn star trope really has held me hostage for a majority of my life. And that belief is that if I do not provide enough sex all the time, whenever they want it, no matter if I'm sick, no matter if I don't feel well. You know, this incredibly high standard for myself. If I'm not able to provide that, they have the right to cheat on me or leave. You know, such high stakes. And then on the other side of it, really considering and exploring what qualities about yourself you think are worthless or damaged or broken that maybe aren't. The first part of it that I want to explore is the part of you that maybe you overvalue. And this is really the tropes that I consider holding us hostage. It's the dream of what we wish we were. And I think that's why these tropes hold us hostage. Just to also re-clarify for anyone who maybe doesn't know what a trope is, tropes are essentially almost like archetypes. Tropes are certain character stereotypes within stories. So, you know, you could have the damsel in distress, the knight in shining armor, the chosen one is a trope. There's a lot of different tropes that are very like common, and you hear about them. You know, you have the mentor, the hero, trying to think what else. The mad scientist. Like, you know, as I'm saying these things, I'm sure you're like, oh yeah, okay. So that's because it's a trope. It's a common character stereotype that you hear about. And so we all have these ideas of sort of the fantasy of what we wish we could be. And oftentimes the fantasy of what we wish we could be has come from the stories that we've absorbed. We saw something in a movie, we read something in a book, we heard the biography of someone's life, and it inspired us and caused us to, either as children or at whatever point in our life, you know, these things have accumulated to where we either consciously or subconsciously yearn and dream to be the thing that we are not. And because we are yearning and dreaming for this thing, we are moving towards it. We are trying to move towards it all the time. When maybe, perhaps, that's not who we were actually destined to be, and that's okay. So sometimes these ideas can hold us hostage to the point of making us hate ourselves, making us harder on ourselves than we need to be. There's a lot of obviously unhealthy things that can come from this, especially the more and more unrealistic the fantasy is that we're yearning for and trying to move towards. So that's the other reason why it's really important to understand what sort of trope and what sort of fantasy is holding you hostage. Because if it's very unrealistic, like the porn star trope, I'm gonna feel like a failure all the time. So I need to get rid of that trope. I need to really teach myself how to confront that fantasy to help myself remember that it's not true. I didn't pick up that belief and I didn't pick up that idea for myself. I wasn't born as a child thinking I needed to provide sex like that. I picked up that story and that idea from both the indoctrination that happened to me when I was younger, but also through a lot of the movies that I watched as well. This idea is sort of encouraged nowadays, specifically within my generation, and I think the younger generations for sure, where there is an overemphasis on sex. Like, sex will fix everything. Sex is how you strictly measure love. There's a lot of things going on with sort of like worshiping sex as this end-all be-all solution to finding forever happiness that is not sustainable and not true. So for this activity, your guys' first activity, what I want you to do is I want you to write down 4 male or female characters that you really admire. And this could be a character literally like out of a movie. This could be a cartoon character that you saw as a kid. This could be a real person whose story that you've you read their biography, or maybe it's a celebrity that you've watched online who you feel like you know, but obviously maybe you've never met them, so you don't like actually know them. Take the time, pause this video if you have to, do this later if you have to, but really take the time to try to think about people in whatever category of this. There's different ways you can figure this out for yourself. You can think about your favorite movies and why they're your favorite movies, and is there a specific female in that movie that you really like? That's one way to figure out who the characters might be that you really admire and think about. You could obviously think about celebrities and who's kind of like celebrity social medias you go to a lot, and maybe that's how you figure out that those are the characters that you really admire, is because those are the socials that you go and visit a lot and look at. Another way that you could kind of figure out characters that you really admire are thinking about, like I've talked about this in other interviews and stuff, but think about your favorite, maybe like Disney character or cartoon character from when you were a kid, because it really can start that early, especially for generations that grew up with TV like that. Think about which cartoon characters or which movies as a child where there was a female or male character that really resonated with you. So I want you to kind of really spend time meditating on that, and I want you to come up with at least 4. So that, and you need at least 4 so that you can see the pattern from all of this. So at least 4, but if you can think of more, do more, girl. Like, do whatever you want, or boy. Because really, that's actually, the more that you do, the more it's going to help you. So, I mean, if you want to do like 10 or 15, this exercise is for you, you know? Do whatever you want. That's what's kind of cool about this stuff. So, come up with the characters and write them down. And then when you're thinking about these, the next step of this exercise is that for each individual character, I want you to write down 3 to 4 qualities or more. The more the better with all of this. Write down 3 to 4 qualities or more of what you admire about that character, what you really like about that character. And what you're going to see through this exercise, because I've seen it in mine, is that there will absolutely be a pattern. Maybe they don't all have exactly the same qualities of what you like about them, but there will be a theme. So I want you to pause this video if you have to. Once again, take the time. There's no rush. You know, I really want to emphasize that with all of the activities. If I end up doing more videos like this, or when my book comes out, like, slow down. Let yourself slow down. There's no race. You know, you don't win anything by doing it faster. If anything, you're probably missing out on some stuff to connect with by doing it faster. Really let yourself meditate on that. And so you're gonna do step 1, come up with the characters. Step 2 is writing down all of the qualities. And then step 3 is looking at those qualities, obviously mapping out which ones are the theme, because there should be quite a few characteristics that are a theme. And then I want you to really kind of look internally with yourself and ask yourself, first for the character, if the character did not have these qualities anymore, would I still like the character? Would I still consider the character valuable, interesting, and worth liking, worth being in the movie, their life worth having a biopic made? You know, like, would they still be held to the same likeness for me? And see if these qualities that you've identified in these characters are qualities that you're really wanting for yourself at all. You know, for me, I really admire, just to use myself as an example, strong female characters, almost like masculine energy type characters, who don't have a lot of needs, aren't very emotional, incredibly independent, almost kind of like, they're very good at protecting themselves, you know, and others. They are a bit of the hero. And I'm sure there's a lot more, but I'll share that for now. And I absolutely admire these types of women, because I know for me, I yearn to be that myself. And I don't personally think I would value those characters as much if they did not have those qualities. And I have had to undo the belief within myself that I will not have any value as a person if I am not strong, if I am not incredibly independent, if I am not able to protect those around me without caring if anyone's protecting me, without being the hero. Like, if all these qualities were taken away from myself because I worked really hard to try to get them, and I have some of them for sure, but I will still have value to my friends, especially in moments where I'm falling apart. When I'm falling apart, I lose all these qualities. You know, this is me in my best element. This is me when if you haven't heard of HALT is hungry, angry, lonely, tired. That's a very vulnerable place to be in, is HALT. You really want to pay attention to those 4 letters. This is me when all of my letters are filled. I'm not hungry, I'm not angry, I'm not lonely, I'm not tired. I am able to be strong, a hero, independent. You know what I mean? Provide and protect for others. And I don't want to feel like I have to be that all the time. I don't even know if I want to completely be all of those qualities in the same way anymore. But that is, I think, a really good way of identifying what standards you hold yourself to, that you think, you know, if I don't have this, I'm unlovable, and I have nothing else to offer other than these qualities. That's the other thing that I really figured out with myself, is this is all that I am. You know, and it's not true. It's just that because I was overemphasizing these qualities, I hadn't honed in on all the other really interesting, fun aspects of myself, because I was just hyper focusing on these things. So there's a bunch of other stuff inside of us to explore and to grow, and they're underfed. They're undernourished, these other parts of myself, because I was only focusing on these aspects of myself. It's like going to the gym and only doing your arms, you know, because you think your arms are the only piece of you that matters. So that's activity number 1, and I hope that that's helpful. And please leave comments down below if it was. I really am curious to hear. This is the first video that I've done kind of in regards to these activities that I'm coming up with. So I really would like to hear if you guys like this, what you think about it, and that's the first part of it. The second activity is kind of almost like the inverted part of the first activity. So you could pretty much figure out a significant portion of what you think makes you unlovable and worthless just by considering what is the opposite of the things that you overvalue. But not everything about what we think makes us unlovable is literally just the opposite of these qualities. There definitely can be some like extra things over here, you know, that we think makes us a piece of shit. So there's many reasons you could worry and feel concerned that maybe you're a piece of shit. So I think that, yes, part of this is just inverting the things over here. Like, I'm unlovable if I'm not strong. I'm unlovable if I'm not a porn star trope. You know what I mean? Like the opposite. But there's still other things to be explored that I think are interesting to dive into and can be very empowering to figure out. So for the second part of this activity, there is a short-term version of it that you could probably do within one sitting and maybe figure out quite a bit. But there also is a longer version of it where you can also figure out quite a lot. So I'm kind of recommending both. The short-term version of trying to figure out where you think you're very insecure, incredibly vulnerable. These are the real, I mean, understanding the trope that holds you hostage, that's absolutely a vulnerability and a massive chink in your armor. But understanding where you are sensitive and deeply afraid, like of someone discovering something about you, a quality about you, a habit about you, you know, really exploring the deep fears within us of what might make us feel like we're about to be abandoned is very important, because this is also a very serious vulnerability. When I have been almost literally triggered in these different ways where someone has found the thing that I was afraid of them finding, and then also had the reaction that I was afraid of them having, the devastation that my soul felt on a cellular level, you know, of essentially your worst fear happening in real time, that's a whole thing, you know, which is very different from what we discussed with the tropes holding us hostage. And it's important to face your dragons. it's important to face the monsters in the closet that you're afraid of looking at. Because if you can't even look directly at the thing that you're afraid of, how are you going to get medicine on that wound? How are you going to fix it? How are you going to make it better? When it stays in the dark, neglected, not addressed, it gets infected. It grows mold. Anything would that's left in the dark like that. Looking at these things and calling a spade and really helping yourself learn to look at the things that you're afraid of is a skill that you will be able to take out and use in so many other things in the world. Because where we are afraid of looking at these things within ourselves, in the privacy of our home, when we're alone with just us, if we can't do that there, we are oftentimes frozen and unable to advocate for ourselves or look directly at the hard things within conversations with other people that might come up. So this is a very important thing to learn to do, to learn to sit with, because it's not, oftentimes, so many times, it's not true. Not that it's not there, not that we don't have things to work on, but that this thing makes you so unlovable that if anybody saw it, they would definitely leave. I'm not saying people wouldn't leave. I'm not saying there aren't people that wouldn't look at it and go, oh, you know what I mean? Like, I've had some of those where they go, oh, like it's a very real moment. But not everyone does that. And also the people who went, oh, they weren't for me. Like, they weren't for me, because the people in my life who I've seen their stuff, and I was willing to sit there with them with it. Again, this is not just expecting everyone to take on our baggage. That is not what I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about right now is if you don't pull the things out of the closet and really start getting them out there and looking at them, if you can't do that, why should anyone else be able to do that? And they will stay sick. They will stay torturing you and controlling you. I hope that makes sense. So the short-term version of this activity is remembering seriously significant, what you would almost call significantly traumatic conversations or moments that have happened in your life. And I'm not necessarily talking about like sexual assault or physical assault. I'm talking about where there was an idea presented to you that you found incredibly hurtful on like a traumatic level. Like it still bothers you, it still haunts you. You still think about it. You still sometimes like talk to the person even though they're not there. Like, you know what I mean? There's almost like a compulsiveness around it because it still upsets you so much. Like the really deeply hurtful, painful, upsetting conversations that you've had with other people, you can write them out in full if you want, but just notate them. You know what they are, just notate them. So make a list of that. If you are able to, make a second list of kind of what I was describing, the things that you're afraid of people finding out about you. Whatever that may be. I don't know what it is. It could be benign stuff. Dude, because I have avoidant attachment issues, I know this sounds crazy, but like one of my worst fears is someone discovering that I'm boring. Yeah. That's like a real deep fear of mine. And guess what? That makes it hard for me to build intimacy with people in my life because guess what? I'm freaking boring. Like, I have boring moments. You know what I mean? I'm not a TV. I'm not an Instagram reel. I'm a fucking person. And yet I'm still learning how to let myself be a person. And so it's not always like deep fears like, they're going to find out, I like a certain type of porn. I mean, it might be that, but there's also like really kind of like benign things that almost feel illogically, ridiculously stupid that we're afraid of them. Write those down. And I'm talking about within the sphere of relationships. So you should have 2 lists. And if you're able to come up with both of these short term sitting down, fantastic. Write them out and then really explore, mostly for the conversations, like what about those conversations hurt you so much? Was it that you didn't feel heard? Was it that you felt like they were insinuating something about your character? Was it that you felt abandoned? Like what pieces of the conversation left you feeling so upset that to this day it still haunts you? Find the pattern in those things. And then with the fears, see if there's a pattern. Like why. It's just these activities are to help you explore yourself more. So again, the point is not to come up with an answer as fast as possible. These activities are to help you ask better questions to yourself throughout the day as you go through life. Just ask some more interesting questions. Look at pieces of yourself that you're not even normally looking at. Walk over here and go, what's going on over here? And everybody come over to this corner. Also remembering relearning how to have the ability to laugh at myself throughout this process. Not easy, but very helpful, because otherwise this also can be very, very painful. So once you have identified this list, once you have these aspects of yourself figured out, the really amazing, empowering thing that comes out of this is that now that you know where you are more neglected, more sensitive, and have the areas where you have these deep beliefs, not even fears, but like beliefs, that's the stopping point where people can't go past to actually love you, and you can't even let love in. Now that you have identified these areas and aspects of yourself, you can protect them better. If you run into people who tend to try to figure out where you're, who poke at you and try to elicit different reactions to figure out what these things are, to figure out your list, when before you didn't even know what your list were, but they were figuring out what your list was, you now know what the list is too. And you can protect these aspects of yourself better. Also, you can start reparenting them and giving them love, because they are severely neglected. You can start challenging those thoughts specifically. Instead of just trying to give yourself more of like a generalized reparenting and a generalized self-love, you can really start to apply medicine directly on the specific wounds that you have uncovered. You can really start challenging those beliefs. And you can journal about that. I really hope that you guys understand how powerful like self-talk out loud and journaling is. I talk to myself all the time. I don't care if it makes me look crazy, because when I hear out loud the kind things that I'm saying to myself, it hits in a completely different way than writing it down does. Both are helpful, but I will 1000% talk to myself kindly out loud in moments when I need to hear it. So it's just understanding that this is to help you identify another type of chink in your armor, another type of hole in your armor, an unprotected aspect of your house, so that you can really start to try to heal it and put medicine on it and also protect it better. So I hope that you guys found this video helpful. Let me know what you think about this. If you guys uncover anything cool, obviously don't overshare too much on the internet, never safe. But I really hope that this might help anybody who hasn't really known how to dive deeper and even like where to start to try to figure out these areas of sensitivity and vulnerability. Like, you see the pattern in your life of why relationships are always kind of happening with the same rhythms and in the same ways. And so much of it comes down to our belief about ourselves, the fantasies of what we wish we could be to actually feel worthwhile and lovable, and the fears that we have of why people will leave us. You know what I mean? Because of the other things that we come with, that we have, that we are ashamed of, and we don't take care of properly. So I guess that's all that I have for today. And yeah, thanks as always for watching, and God bless.